Anybody there? Hello, hello, hello. Let's go. We are back in action, and we are ready for the news today. Bum, ba-dum, bum. Oh, yes, we're live. Hi, everybody. Hello, SML. Hello, Commander Spock. Hello, Hi. Hello, Commander Spock. What's up, everybody? How's it going? I hope everybody had a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and then also a great Monday. It was a pretty wild one in the news. Man, I was in the middle of nowhere, which was fantastic. Anytime I can unplug, I will take that opportunity. Anybody do anything fun this weekend? Let's see here. I think we're fired up across the board, but let me triple check. TikTok, is TikTok up? All right, cool. There we go. We're off to the races. All right, so coming up today, we are going to be leading with this indictment of James Comey. Again, second indictment. This one is about those seashells that said 8647 that Comey took a picture of, posted on Instagram, and now he may be arrested by the feds. They have indicted him for, I think, threat against the president. And so we will see what that looks like, and we will get a refresher on the last time he was indicted and the last time charges were thrown out. So we've got a legal analyst, we've got Kelly O'Donnell at the White House following this breaking news. Also, we've got Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe is following the King of England in the nation's capital. The capital had a royal address. So, you know, we'll cover that. We're also going to be talking about the detention of children in ICE facilities like Dilley. We've got a lawyer that we're going to be chatting with about that. We're going to be talking about the UAE leaving OPEC, which is a huge, huge deal. OPEC is like the largest, most powerful consortium of oil-producing countries in the world. Does not include the United States. In fact, it was set up, I think, in the 60s as somewhat, it wasn't set up to be like a bulwark against the United States, but it acted that way. Basically, those countries, including Venezuela and the countries in the Middle East, I think it was Saudi Arabia and Venezuela were founding members. They were trying to limit the influence that foreign Western companies had over the production and the price of oil, so they all formed this consortium, OPEC, and they ended up controlling the majority of the oil production, the oil flow through the world. They're one of the most powerful organizations on planet Earth. Now, we're watching what's happening in Iran. Iran is one of the members of OPEC. Venezuela is one of the members of OPEC. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, like a lot of the countries that are now being, dragged into what we're seeing happen in Iran. And today we heard that the UAE is potentially leaving OPEC. So what is that going to do? Short term, I don't know. Volatility in the markets, we're going to be talking to an oil analyst. Long term, also unclear. Does this shift the balance of power? Does this give the United States and Western companies a lot more leverage when it comes to oil production and the price of oil? Possibly. What does that mean for gas prices? It is a very big geopolitical question. So yeah, that is going to be a fascinating conversation. We've got three very nuanced conversations coming up today. We're also going to be talking about the Flores Agreement, how important that is for the framework of how children are held in ICE detention. And we're going to be talking to our boy, Brian Chung, who we actually pre-taped with just a little while ago, about this lawsuit. Elon Musk in court today suing OpenAI and Sam Altman, and he's basically suing OpenAI, but he's suing them for $100 billion, but he doesn't want the $100 billion. He wants that $100 billion to go back to OpenAI. but not the for-profit side, the nonprofit side, which he helped found, which, again, it's kind of like a help me help you situation with, oh yeah, Elon Musk also has a competitor to OpenAI, even though he helped found OpenAI. He's also got his own XAI, like AI company. So as you can imagine, things get real complex really fast. And we're gonna do our best to break it down. Isabella, thanks for sharing the stream. We have just, yes, UAE, that's coming up, Tina. We're gonna do a good breakdown onto all that. SML is back, wonderful. Commander Spock, more geopolitical fragmentation, selling Yep, that would be very interesting. Might mean more oil in the market, lower prices. Potentially, it could also mean some unilateral agreements, some, again, like OPEC is not as strong or as united as it was going into what happened in Iran. What this means for the future of that organization is still yet to be seen, but it definitely seems like their power is somewhat waning. Steve, what's up? Western Pennsylvania in the house. Nice. Delaware? Hey, 32-bit panda. Steve, I look confused? Yeah, I'm always confused. Always. That is the state of being in the news. Anybody that gives you this look on the news, and that's tonight, we don't know it's a crazy world. It is crazy right now. Up is down is up, left is right is left. Everything is topsy-turvy, okay? And so in this show, you're gonna see a lot of questions, not necessarily lead to answers, but lead to more questions. Because again, making sense of all of the changing dynamics is very difficult. It is, as you can imagine, constantly in flux, and we're going to do our best to just honestly tell you like what we know and what we don't know, and what we're wondering, and the questions that we're asking usually will hopefully lead to a little bit more clarity, if not definitive truth. I gave up on definitive truth for the time being, and I just want a little bit of like give us a sense of the direction that things are headed. So that's why you'll see a lot of focus on nuance here in the show, and a lot of we got close to the root of it, and yet it remains elusive. That's the gist of how I see these things. Let's see, what else? Yes, Reed, for sure. El Dorado, Arkansas, great to see you. Vidal G7, what up? Yorkie, yet to be seen. Do you have a Ron Burgundy style saying or facial expression?
5 minutes.
T, down into my belly. No, Ryan didn't like that. We got Big Mike, we got Ryan on the floor today. They're fighting back against the Artemo over here. That's the robot cam, and then it's a collaboration. It is a cyborg human collaboration in the studio here on the West Coast. If you guys are just rolling into here and wondering what is going on, this is Stay Tuned Now, the pre-show. In 5 minutes, we're gonna have an actual news show that starts from 5 o'clock West Coast time to 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock on the East Coast, to 9 o'clock. And the cool thing about this show is if you have questions, try to slip them in the chat while we're having the discussions with our experts or our correspondents, and I'll try to get them onto the show. And if not, then we can discuss them during the commercial breaks, because we get to talk during commercial breaks. SML, you're asking about the leg? Oh, Vidal, that's no way, that is awesome. Northern California, what part? SML, the leg is still in the boot. Still in the boot. And Lisa is still recovering. We're not in great shape. Falling apart over here. It probably was, it was a topic of conversation outside of the White House, and we're gonna ask Gabe Gutierrez about that because he is reporting on what happened at Capitol Hill. Ro Khanna had a conference with some of those survivors. They listened to the King's speech. The King did not address Jeffrey Epstein. He did not talk about the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, but he had this very, very vague reference that a palace insider said was him addressing it. So we'll play that for you and let you hear it for yourself. Let's see. What's going on with everyone's legs breaking on the Stay Tuned Now crew? You guys hear that? Watch out.
Who's that?
There's a curse.
What's that, right?
There's a curse. All right. Like 2.5 minutes till the show. Luckily, I'm not a horse. Beach life. Yeah, I would make some, yeah, I would be a very bad, very sad, very slow horse. And if I broke my leg, I hope that I could find somebody that was caring enough to just, you know, build me a cool futuristic prosthetic. I don't know. T. Yep, we got it right here. Dude, oh, Tina, congratulations, by the way. Yeah, that's awesome. Congrats, everybody. Tina just got a huge new job. Yeah, I know. You might, yeah, you're the OG here. Working on the space game? No freaking way. What is it, like a big, is it kind of like No Man's Sky-ish, or now you know I'm gonna be the first to play it. I will be in there, day one fan. You are the best, so yes, I can't wait to see. Yes, we cannot wait to see. All right. Oh, we miss you too, SML. June, hello. We're doing pretty good. We had a great weekend. We went camping, we hit Joshua Tree, then we went to Prescott up in Arizona, slept among the desert, yuccas, and then the pines. It was awesome. I loved it. My wife is still getting used to camping. The kids, Kira, my daughter, she's 4, she like peeks her little head out of the tent because we got the Joshua Tree at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And so we threw her in the tent and then she just passed out. Didn't see it. And then she wakes up and like the sun is coming up over the desert. She peeks her little head out of the tent and she's like, Dad, where are all the trees? Like, there's no shade around here. And I was like, yeah, this is the desert. There's no shade. And she's like, oh, biscuits. Peak life, you know? Peak life. All right, 30 seconds to showtime. Here we go. All right, locking back into the news here. Where are we starting? Okay, dun. All right, we got James Comey up first. 20 seconds. Let's get down to business here. All right, have a great show, everybody. 10 seconds.
5, 4.
Good evening, it's Scotty Schwartz, and tonight, another federal indictment for James Comey, the former FBI director and longtime foe of President Trump's, now facing 2 counts for allegedly threatening violence against the president, and the charges stem from this Instagram post from last May of seashells in the sand spelling out 8647. 86 is slang that usually means to nix or to try to get rid of something, and Trump is the 47th president of the United States. Now, no matter how it looks, here's how Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche broke it down this afternoon.
Threatening the life of anybody is dangerous and potentially a crime. Threatening the life of the President of the United States will never be tolerated by the Department of Justice.
Now, at the time, Comey deleted the post within hours of posting it, explaining in a follow-up post, quote, I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down. And just hours ago on Substack, Comey once again maintained his innocence. Watch.
Well, they're back. This time about a picture of seashells on a North Carolina beach a year ago. And this won't be the end of it. But nothing has changed with me. I'm still innocent. I'm still not afraid. And I still believe in the independent federal judiciary, so let's go. But it's really important that all of us remember This is not who we are as a country. This is not how the Department of Justice is supposed to be. And the good news is we get closer every day to restoring those values. Keep the faith.
In just a minute, we're going to break down the charges with our legal analyst. But first, let's go out to NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs Correspondent Kelly O'Donnell in Washington. Kelly, we know the last year we saw the DHS investigate Comey over this post, and then he was questioned by the Secret Service about it. Do we know how it went from that to this?
Well, we don't know the specifics behind the scenes, Gotti, but the FBI, the Secret Service, which is a part of DHS, did investigate this as a threat. They took some time doing it. What we don't know is why now. The case was presented to a grand jury in North Carolina, and it returned this 2-count indictment. 1 count is for making a threat against the president. The other is for doing that, making that threat using communication that crossed state lines. So it's 2 federal felonies. And of course, there are those who would argue that this is simply free speech. And certainly Comey tonight, through his lawyer, is saying they deny that this was criminal behavior with the plan to try to harm the president, and that they will vigorously defend not only Comey, who is, of course, FBI director, but also a high official in the Justice Department during his career. But they also say they will try to vindicate the First Amendment. Their case is this was speech that any of us are able to engage in. Now, the difference, the Department of Justice says, is they believe that this was a threat against the president, and that making a threat is something that they will aggressively go after. You also have to remember that the president has repeatedly asked for his Department of Justice to prosecute, to go after James Comey and other people that he has perceived as political rivals or foes.
Yeah, speaking of which, wasn't Comey indicted less than a year ago for something else entirely, and then those charges were dismissed? Can you remind us of what happened that time?
Yes, this is the second attempt to indict Comey. So what happened was a different case, a different jurisdiction. That was in Virginia, and it was an indictment last year where the prosecutors alleged that Comey had been untruthful under oath when he was on camera. It was during the COVID period, so he was doing a Zoom call providing testimony to Congress. Well, ultimately, a federal judge said that indictment needed to be dismissed because he took issue with how the U.S. attorney in that case who brought the charges was appointed, saying that was an unlawful appointment. It was thrown out. However, the Department of Justice is appealing that. But it gives you a sense of how this Department of Justice under the Trump administration is going after some cases that others might find questionable or a long shot to go against Comey, to try to prosecute him. So a lying to Congress charge that was dismissed and is being appealed, and now a threat on the life of the president charge.
Yeah, and again, it's one thing to take things to court. It's another to prove things like intent. I know you asked about that a little bit earlier, but Comey said he didn't see this as a violent message. He saw this as a political one. What did you get as a response?
Well, that is the key thing. When you have political speech, part of what the prosecutors will be required to do, in many cases, there is a requirement to show intent, because the charge is that he willfully and knowingly was threatening the life of the president. Comey says, this was political speech. I didn't know it was a problem and took it right down. So I asked the acting attorney general about that key issue of how do you prove intent in these circumstances?
This case was indicted today. This conduct occurred about a year ago, May 15th of last year. There's been a tremendous amount of investigation. And how do you prove intent in any case? You prove intent with witnesses, with documents, with the defendant himself to the extent it's appropriate. And that's how we'll improve intent in this case. And so I think that talking about what Mr. Comey will or will not do if there's a trial, when there's a trial, it's very premature for me to do that today.
And that is Todd Blanche, who is acting attorney general. You may remember that President Trump publicly talked about Pam Bondi not moving quickly enough when she was attorney general on cases like this against James Comey, Letitia James, the Democrat attorney general of the state of New York, and others. So there is a lot of pressure on Todd Blanche to deliver on what President Trump wants. Gotti?
Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. Kelly O'Donnell, thank you. And let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Misty Maris. Misty, great to see you. We know the first indictment against Comey was eventually dropped, but what's the likelihood that this one sticks? Is there more of an argument this time by the DOJ in this Instagram post?
Well, so the charges are completely different, but I would expect Comey to attack this before it even gets to trial to try and get it thrown out before it moves through the process. And the argument will likely be that this is a vindictive prosecution. And Gotti is going to look back to that first indictment and say, well, that one didn't stick. So now the DOJ is coming after me with something different. So that would be argument number one. The second argument will be that the speech in this Instagram post was protected First Amendment speech. And all of that will likely be raised before this case goes through the process. I would expect it to be raised in the early stages to try and get this thrown out before it ever makes it to a jury.
And Misty, there's the court, and then there's the court of public opinion, and both of those are in play here. But as you know, I mean, if this thing goes to court, you've got discovery, you've got maybe access to all kinds of, I don't know, text messages, all kinds of things that can be open in the discovery process. You've also got the possibility that he's handcuffed, right? I mean, are we going to see both of those things here?
Yeah, so as far as an arrest, there is an arrest warrant that was handed down by the grand jury, which means that there was probable cause. That's what the grand jury determined to indict and also to issue an arrest warrant. So it's questionable what's going to happen next. In general, once there's an arrest warrant, the U.S. Marshals would come and arrest the individual. They'd go before a judge. The judge would make a determination about whether they're held behind bars or released on their own recognizance or something else. I would expect Comey's attorneys are probably trying to work with law enforcement to turn him in. Gotti, what we can expect as far as next steps is that once an arrest is made, or if he turns himself in, there's a initial conference, an arraignment that usually happens within 24 to 48 hours. So we could see that coming very, very soon.
And I know it's been almost a year since that post, and the DOJ has been working on the indictment since last May. Like, how does that process work? How did this work with the grand jury? How did they indict him on this?
So he was indicted today, is what we learned at that press conference with Todd Blanche. The grand jury returned the true bill on these two charges today, but it was the result of a year-long investigation. You'll see in the indictment, Gotti, which Kelly broke down, there's not a lot of additional information. It's really the bare minimum, which is not unusual for an indictment. But the question is, what other evidence exists and was collected during this year-long investigation that we're not seeing? So Kelly herself, as well as others, asked questions of Todd Blanche about what else we might see. And he didn't answer anything out of the four corners of the indictment. But to your point, Gotti, you could see a lot of electronic messages, witnesses, all of that would be at play if this case makes its way to trial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that discovery would be pretty wild. Misty Maris, thank you so much. And the Trump administration is also headed to court now to try to get the judge who blocked the White House ballroom construction to change his mind in light of what happened this weekend at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. This is part of a growing call by MAGA and Republicans for more security, citing this weekend's assassination attempt at the dinner. And while the president previously said the ballroom would be paid for by private donations, Republicans are also now asking for more than $400 million in federal funds to help pay for that project. Let's bring in Gary Grumbach. Gary, so what's the likelihood that this judge is going to reconsider his order blocking the reconstruction after what we saw this weekend?
So this is very likely because, remember, an appeals court has already paused his order, which means it's not in effect right now. And as we speak right now, construction cranes are moving around the White House and helping build that ballroom both above ground and below ground. And when the National Trust sued originally, they asked for several different things, most of which have already been taken care of. They have the National Capital Planning Board Commission approval. They have the Commission on Finance approval. They gave the public time to give public comment. And now the only thing they're asking for left is the congressional authorization piece. And that's all that the Trump administration needs to do, is get congressional authorization for this ballroom, and essentially this lawsuit could go away.
The congressional authorization and then like the $40 million or $400 million question now, right? Is that request a surprise? And like, could that happen? Could that pass through Congress?
It is shocking that the Trump administration would be asking Congress for $400 million because it is exactly the opposite of what President Trump has been saying dozens of times over the last few months. I want to give you a few examples here. In mid-April, he said the ballroom is free to our country. In March, he said this is being financed privately. In February, he said we did this at no charge to the taxpayer. And Trump posted in January, this is a gift, quote, zero taxpayer funding. So this is exactly the opposite if they go through with this $400 million. Now, of course, Democrats across Capitol Hill are going to be strongly opposed to $1 of taxpayer funding going to this ballroom. And you'll remember there is already a ton of money in private donations, including from our parent company Comcast, going to this ballroom.
Yeah, and Gary, let's take a quick listen to what Trump had to say after that incident on Saturday about the ballroom here.
We need the ballroom. That's why Secret Service, that's why the military are demanding it.
And, as you know, we're building a big, beautiful, very, very secure ballroom in every way with massive bulletproof glass that's almost 4 inches thick. It's pretty amazing stuff.
It's not a safe ballroom. I'm building a safe ballroom. And one of the reasons I'm building it is exactly what happened last night.
So logistically, would the White House Correspondents' Dinner be in the ballroom?
Not for that specific event, and there's a lot of reasons why. One, it's a private event held by an outside association that has nothing to do with the administration itself. This ballroom is going to be inside the White House complex and used for any event that the president wants to use it for, but they're going to be White House formal events, things like the state dinner tonight that is being held for the king, for example. Also, the White House Correspondents' Dinner has almost 3,000 people in that ballroom. This ballroom that is going to be built on the lawn of the White House can fit about 1,000 people, Gotti.
Gary Grumbuck, thank you so much. And the controversy over late-night host Jimmy Kimmel's comments about Melania Trump continues today. Both the president and the first lady have called on ABC to fire Kimmel, but now the FCC is also getting involved. They are ordering all 8 Disney-owned local stations to renew their license years before expiration or possibly face losing their ability to broadcast. And tonight, the FCC responding to criticism about the order for renewal, saying, quote, as the agency decision makes clear, the early renewal order is based on a long-running FCC investigation into Disney's DEI conduct and not any speech. Chloe Malas has the latest.
Tonight, pressure is mounting for ABC and Disney after an unprecedented move by the FCC, ordering all 8 Disney-owned local stations at major cities across the country to file early license renewals years before their expiration. If the renewals are not granted, they would lose their ability to broadcast. Tom Wheeler served as FCC chairman under President Obama.
Good question. Let me be real specific. It has been 40 years since the FCC revoked a license, a broadcast television license.
The FCC has been investigating Disney, the parent company of ABC, over its DEI policy since last year. A source with knowledge of the matter tells NBC News that Kimmel's recent comments about the First Lady will now be part of the review.
You know how sometimes you wake up in the morning and the First Lady puts out a statement demanding you be fired from your job?
Jimmy Kimmel addressing the latest controversy.
Well, I agree that hateful and violent rhetoric is something we should reject. I do, and I think a great place to start to dial that back would be to have a conversation with your husband about it.
This clash stemming from a joke the late-night host made last week in a sketch about the then-upcoming White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Our First Lady, Melania, is here. Look at Melania, so beautiful. Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow.
Kimmel now defending his words.
It was a very light roast joke about the fact that he's almost 80 and she's younger than I am. It was not, by any stretch of the definition, a call to assassination.
Melania Trump called Kimmel's words hateful and violent rhetoric, sentiments echoed by President Trump, who demanded Kimmel's dismissal. The firestorm comes just a month after new Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro took the helm, and 7 months after ABC briefly suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live after controversial remarks about the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. In a statement to NBC News, Disney says they have a long record of operating in full compliance with FCC rules.
Chloe Melas reporting. Chloe, thank you. And now over to Washington, where President Trump is hosting King Charles tonight for a state dinner at the White House, packed with all of the pomp and pageantry you'd expect. But before the toasts and the formalities tonight, the king delivered a message of unity in front of Congress, emphasizing the strength of the relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. as the two nations celebrate 250 years of American independence. Listen.
The alliance that our two nations have built over the centuries, and for which we are profoundly grateful to the American people, is truly unique. That partnership, I believe, Mr. Speaker, is more important today than it has ever been.
The speech comes at a time when tensions have been building between the two countries over the war in Iran. The king also spoke about the strength of democracy, stressed the importance of NATO, and called on the U.S. to help defend Ukraine. King Charles now becomes just the second British monarch ever to address Congress, followed in the footsteps of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who delivered her own historic speech way back in 1991. Tomorrow, the king is headed to New York, where he's expected to visit the 9/11 memorial. Yeah, let's bring in Gabe Gutierrez, who's been following this story for us. Gabe, this was a historic moment. What were the biggest takeaways from what we heard from the King's address?
Well, certainly, Gotti, look, King Charles, Queen Camilla came here to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States, but they had a lot on their plate, and they still do. The trip will continue. There's a state dinner happening right now here at the White House. But listen, kings and queens don't negotiate policy. Their job, tone, diplomacy, try to build this relationship, which had been fractured in recent months, of course, with President Trump taunting Keir Starmer, especially over Starmer's opposition to the war in Iran. But several big takeaways here that there seemed to be a very warm relationship between King Charles and President Trump. It was a very warm red carpet reception here at the White House. Let's listen to a little bit more what King Charles had to say during his address to Congress.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, America's words carry weight and meaning, as they have since independence. The actions of this great nation matter even more.
And certainly, Gotti, that was interpreted by some, to really be gently pushing back on the Trump administration and some of the president's recent criticism of NATO. The king, the monarch, he brought that up a couple of times during his speech. Of course, never overtly criticizing President Trump. He, of course, wouldn't do that. But he did gently bring up the subject of NATO and bring up that, NATO allies came to the U.S. aid after 9/11. And also, Gotti, he specifically referenced backing Ukraine, and that got a lot of applause inside that House chamber. Certainly, when it comes to whatever King Charles chose to include in that speech, we should look at that really closely, because just the fact that he brought that up, that he brought up NATO, that he chose to speak about Ukraine, and that also he mentioned that he had served in the British Royal Navy, which, of course, President Trump had disparaged during this ongoing conflict with Iran. So certainly, if you had to, one takeaway is that King Charles managed to push back against President Trump, but he did so very nicely.
Yeah, with a lot of pomp and circumstance in the Capitol, right across the street. We're also hearing that King Charles is not going to be meeting with Epstein survivors during his trip, and he did not address any of that in his speech, but a palace aide did tell us that he wishes to acknowledge them when he said this. Let's take a listen.
In both of our countries, it is the very fact of our vibrant, diverse, and free societies that gives us our collective strength, including to support victims of some of the ills that so tragically exist in both our societies today.
That is, obviously those words are very, very vague, but some of those survivors of Jeffrey Epstein spoke a little bit earlier today at a news conference led by Congressman Ro Khanna. What did we hear from them about all this?
Yeah, that's right. And it goes back to what I was saying. You have to scrutinize basically every syllable almost of what King Charles was saying to kind of pull any meaning from that. But certainly, look, a lot of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and their families had really been looking forward to this trip in the sense that they wanted to highlight, this looming cloud over the British monarchy. Of course, King Charles's brother, Prince Andrew, stripped of his royal titles for while he's been under pressure for alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein, though he's denied any wrongdoing. But yes, you mentioned earlier today here in Washington, Congressman Ro Khanna gathered some of those survivors of Epstein and their families, and they are pushing for reforms to better help victims and survivors of sex trafficking and sexual abuse. Let's listen to what the brother of Virginia Giuffre, one of Jeffrey Epstein's most prominent accusers, had to say.
Survivors are here, sitting with members of Congress, still fighting to be heard, still pushing for real accountability, while many of the powerful figures connected to these systems remain just out of reach, unable to acknowledge survivors face to face. You would expect this to be a moment for the King to give a message to the world that he stands with survivors.
But again, Gotti, King Charles not expected to meet with any of them on this trip, which, by the way, continues tomorrow in New York, as you mentioned, and then also on Thursday when the King and Queen are set to visit a national park in Virginia.
Gabe Gutierrez at the White House. Gabe, thank you. And it was the first day of testimony in the high-stakes trial over alleged betrayal and deceit between Elon Musk and Sam Altman that could change the future of AI. And the first witness called in this case was Elon Musk himself. Musk is suing OpenAI and its two co-founders, accusing them of putting commercial interests over the public good because the company pivoted from a nonprofit entity to a for-profit company. And in some ways, the trial is the climax to a years-long beef over OpenAI, the company Musk founded with Altman and Greg Brockman back in 2015. Musk is asking for $134 billion in damages, but it gets a little complicated as to where that money would go. And as for Altman, OpenAI its CEO, he wants them to be removed. Lawyers for OpenAI argue that Musk doesn't really care about the common good, and he's only suing because he did not get his way here. Joining us now is NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Brian, great to see you. Elon Musk taking the stand today. What did we hear from him?
Yeah, well, we heard from Elon Musk again. He's the plaintiff in this case. He's suing Sam Altman. He's alleging that when he gave OpenAI and Sam Altman $38 million to stand up this venture about 10 years ago, that it was on the premise that this would be a nonprofit company. So he feels slighted that OpenAI would later change its corporate structure to incorporate a for-profit arm. So Elon Musk did take the stand after opening statements from both his side as well as Sam Altman's side. He talked a lot about himself, kind of giving a little bit of background on who he is, as if anyone in the room needed to know who Elon Musk is. But then he started to get into the meaty part of this, which is that he felt that OpenAI needed to be put together because he was concerned with what Google was doing with their AI, but that he really wanted this to remain a nonprofit type of think tank, making sure that the code was open, hence the name OpenAI. He said in testimony that he even helped create the name. He helped recruit some of the people over to OpenAI, but then he started to talk about the fact that he was disappointed that Sam Altman ultimately made changes to the company in a way that he saw as not holding true to the principles that he was sold on when he first gave them that money. Now, OpenAI denies these allegations. They say that Elon's trying to put up a version of events that's not true, that at one point he even wanted to merge OpenAI into Tesla. So this all gets at what is 50% a story about the future of artificial intelligence, but it's also 50% story of a schoolyard feud between two people who clearly don't like each other. Gotti, I'm sure you've seen some of those X posts. Elon Musk has called him Scam Altman. Altman has fired back on Twitter. This is very much something that's playing out in public view.
Yeah, public view, to probably the judge's chagrin, as we heard today. Brian, schoolyard fight is such a wonderful analogy, and yet when you think about it, this is the most consequential business leader, founder, innovator of our time, talking about another company that has now become one of the most consequential underpinners of modern society. This AI component that really started with OpenAI And Musk is basically wanting it to go back to, this nonprofit kind of for the good of humanity status. He's using the court system to try to do that. Legally, does he have a shot in making that happen? It seems like a moonshot here.
Yeah, well, again, let's kind of outline what Elon Musk is asking for here. So he has told the court that if he wins, he wants OpenAI to give up over $130 billion. Now, I should point out, a lot of people might be like, what does Elon need $130 billion for? He's already super rich. Well, he's not going to take that money. If he wins, he says that he wants the for-profit arm of OpenAI to give that $130+ billion into the not-for-profit side of the business. And he also wants Sam Altman out of the company. You would imagine that would do immense damage to a company that is seen as one of the top names in the AI space. This couldn't be coming at a worse time for OpenAI, as they're also trying to compete with the likes of Anthropic, with Google, with Meta as well, with the crowded field of these major AI players, including Elon Musk's own company, xAI. Right. That's why OpenAI is pushing back and saying, look, Elon's putting this lawsuit out there because he wants to hobble a competitor. Again, what does the 9-person jury as well as the judge think in this case? That's the legal question that's going to be played out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, those three things, his own AI company, OpenAI, and Sam Altman. I mean, what you're describing there is him suing to basically help me help you. Put this money, not for me, but back into your company in the nonprofit side, and then also Sam Altman out. It is such a fascinating case, such an important case, and one we will watch to see where it goes next. Brian Chung, thank you so much. Tonight, at least 26 million people across the United States are at risk for severe weather, with parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana all under tornado watches. And take a look at some of these devastating images after a powerful thunderstorm hit the Midwest. More than 150,000 people are already without power. Authorities are saying at least one person was killed out in Michigan. And Tennessee was hit pretty hard as well. You can see here a tree came crashing down during a lightning storm. That's not all. More than 30 reports of large hail have already come in today, causing major damage across several states. And look at this. This is a massive hailstone in Arkansas. That's about the size of a baseball, or a bigger, it looks like a golf ball there. Let's bring in Shaquille Brewster, who's following this from Germantown, Illinois.
Hi there, Gotti. Well, you see the rain coming down here right now. We know other parts of the country, especially in the south, are dealing with some severe weather. We've been seeing golf ball, even baseball-sized hail coming down in parts of Texas and parts of Arkansas, even Missouri as well. But folks here in Illinois, they're still picking up the pieces to the damage that we saw from what was an EF1 tornado in this area. Just look at some of the damage that we saw here. This home, I spoke to the gentleman who lives here. He told me he fled. He heard the tornado sirens. He left. He went to a basement to a nearby home, and he spent the day racing to clear out as much of his items as possible. The tree on the other side uprooting, crashing down onto his home. You see some of the roof and some of the structure in his front lawn. A similar situation for this homeowner here. You see the walls now caved in, the roof completely gone there. I spoke to this homeowner earlier today. Listen to a little bit of what she told me. What are you thinking looking at this right now?
That I don't have anything anymore. Nothing. I have my clothes, though.
And Gotti, I was here as the National Weather Service team was out here surveying this damage. They're saying what you see here is consistent with an EF1 tornado. They say that they estimate the wind speeds here to be about 90 miles an hour, but this was part of a system of other reported and now confirmed tornadoes in this area, some of them reaching that EF2 level above 100-mile-an-hour wind speeds. And remember, Gotti, it's not just this area now. Going into the evening, we're watching the south, many southern states, on top of the wildfires that we've been seeing in Georgia and Florida as well. There is a lot of severe weather across the country, and Gotti, unfortunately, there's no end in sight.
Yeah, I'm praying for a little bit of rain tonight, but none of that. Shaq Brewster, thank you so much. And don't go anywhere. Coming up next, we're going to look into the conditions kids are experiencing while being held in ICE detention centers. Plus, a hot air balloon crashes into a building. More on what happened here. Wow. And also, we are trying a little something new here. If you see this little QR code, feel free to scan through. You can chat with us live during the breaks. That'll take you behind the scenes, streaming on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch. Swing by and let us know your thoughts all hour long.
Two minutes. We got 2 minutes. All right, chat, we got 2 minutes. Let's see. What are we talking about here? Chuck Norris? But we have not mentioned Chuck Norris once here. Let's see. The weather. Dun, 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 dun. T. Kyle. That was bigger than the gold ball. I think golf ball, yeah. It looked, I mean, I would hate to be pelted with one of those. Sale of the Obsession. Yeah, I was reading. It is a little distracting when you guys get all crazy in here and start, yelling at each other. Maybe we just all get along in this chat. You can vote for whoever you want. You can see the world however you want, but maybe we can all just, be cordial with each other. We've all got family members of different political persuasions. That's how you should think of this chat. I met you on Miss Rachel. Thanks. Yes, no, yes. Guess what? Tomorrow, Miss Rachel, Ray Ray, as we call her at our house, is going to be joining us. So we're going to chat with her. It'll be a nice reunion. Dublin or Dubbin? Is it Dublin or Dubbin? Hi, L. G, stop. Camilo. Hey, Camilo. Do I know you, Camilo? Thanks so much. Let's see. Author Devin Shannon. That is a very good question. I don't know if Montecito has made it out to the east or to the East Coast. Yeah. I think the king will meet his son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren while he's here in America. That is a really good question. We should see what the Royals, the Californian Royals, are doing right now. My weekend was great, SML. Let's see. That is a very interesting take. Paso con queso. Totally see where you're coming from there.
5.
All right, here we go.
4, 3.
Hey, welcome back. Here are some of the headlines that we are watching tonight. Former NBA player and assistant coach Damon Jones pled guilty to federal wire fraud conspiracy charges today. Last year, Jones was arrested as part of a larger FBI probe into sports betting and illegal poker with other NBA figures and the mafia. In court, Jones admitted to giving insider information about NBA players to gamblers and also to participating in rigged poker games. And an investigation is underway after a woman died yesterday after going over a cruise ship balcony and landing on a deck below. Carnival Cruise Line confirmed the woman went over the balcony of her stateroom when the ship was near Catalina Island here in California. The woman has not been identified, but was traveling with her family. They alerted the crew. And a Nevada judge sentenced Dancing with Wolves star Nathan Chasinghorse to life in prison yesterday for sexually assaulting Indigenous women and girls. The actor was convicted back in January on 13 charges, mostly sexual assault related. Chasinghorse has denied all accusations, but he's also has sexual assault charges pending in Canada. And a hot air balloon up in Northern California slammed into a casino because of chaotic winds. Only the pilot was in the balloon. He tried repeatedly to land until finally landing in a field. The pilot was not hurt after that very close call, but they did take out some power lines when descending. The Sky River Casino was actually celebrating a groundbreaking for a new hotel. Definitely something along the way. And the State Department has released new images of a limited series of passports to celebrate America's big 250 years. And those passports feature an image of President Trump along with his signature. They say the new passports will become available this summer for as long as they're available. And turning now to the thousands of children who have been detained by immigration officials and the growing lawsuits highlighting some of the alarming conditions they face. One lawsuit says a toddler was hospitalized with respiratory failure, then returned to the ICE detention center and allegedly denied prescription medication. Meanwhile, 911 calls describe kids burning with fever, struggling to breathe while in detention, and data shows that in the last couple of years, over 900 kids have been detained for longer than 20 days, which is supposed to be the limit set by the 1997 legal settlement. DHS has dismissed allegations of poor care at these facilities, including the controversial Dilley Center in Texas, saying it was purpose-built to ensure that families in detention are comfortable and have all of their needs cared for. And joining us now is Becky Wallazin. She's a senior attorney at the National Center for Youth Law. Becky, thanks so much for being with us. You've been inside some of these detention centers. You've talked to the kids themselves. What's it like inside, and how long are these kids usually kept there?
Well, the detention centers, to be clear, are a prison. They are a jail. And detaining children is a choice that this government is making, where there are many, many alternatives that are far more humane and actually much more cost-effective as well. And so what these detention centers are like are an enclosed, secure jail or prison where families are kept. They are highly surveilled. There is fully inadequate medical care, and the conditions are one of constant fear and threat for the children that are inside of them. They're held for very long periods of time as well in these horrible conditions. In the Flores Settlement Agreement, which is an agreement that allows me to go in and monitor and talk to children, there is a benchmark of about 20 days that the court has recognized is an amount of time the government can take to process children's cases. But we've seen children held for far longer, including children held for well over 100 days. And so children are having to endure this really stressful and traumatic environment. And that leads to a lot of harm. There's also
I'm so glad you brought up the Flores, the Flores settlement. If I could just stop you real fast, because it's such an important piece of all of this. You know, for those that are unfamiliar, the Flores settlement, 1985, Jenny Flores, it was a massive settlement that kind of became the de facto framework for what used to be the conditions that the government agreed to follow. They were privy, or they were a party to this settlement, and these were the conditions that have gone before Republicans, before Democrats, and they've been upheld by courts. And you said one of them was the 20 days, that the kid should not be held for more than 20 days. There are a lot of other components to the Flores settlement. And the question I have is the Flores settlement still being followed? Like, break this down for simple folks that are trying to wrap their heads around one of the most complex issues, because this is one that I just, as much as I read about it, I still don't understand how legally this is allowed to happen.
Well, a lot of this is not allowed to happen legally, but the Flores Settlement Agreement is a longstanding settlement agreement that essentially establishes very basic humanitarian conditions that the government agrees to uphold if it decides to hold children in its custody. And so what this means is that they have to be in safe, sanitary conditions. They have to be promptly released if possible. They cannot be held for an indefinite period of time. And there are several other components of it as well. What has developed over the past many years that it has been in effect is that the government has repeatedly tried to exit the settlement agreement without complying with its terms. And so the settlement agreement envisioned that the government would promote its own regulations that would satisfy these basic humanitarian requirements. And to date, they have not done that. They have not promulgated their own regulations that satisfy the basic requirements of what Flores requires for holding children in DHS custody. And so that's why it still applies today.
Is there an accurate number right now of how many kids are in government custody, both unaccompanied and families?
Well, what we know right now is that from when this administration reopened family detention until about December, there were over 2,000 children that had been held in ICE custody. And the most recent information that we have around unaccompanied children who are held in the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement is that there are over 2,000 children currently held in ORR custody as well. And those lengths of custody are extraordinarily long. They've ballooned in the past year, and currently children who are detained have been held for more than 200 days, despite the fact that most of them have family members who have tried to sponsor them and bring them home to take care of them. But the government is not releasing these children, although they're mandated to do that by law.
Now, I'm sorry, and just to clarify, 200 days in detention. The Florida settlement says 20 days, and that is in like detention centers. Are those 200 days held in detention centers or held in some of those kind of safe homes?
The 200 days are in the Office of Refugee Resettlement shelters. They're sometimes large facilities that hold many children, but they are typically, not all of them, but typically licensed to take care of children.
Becky, really appreciate your time and really appreciate you shedding some light on all of this. Tomorrow, we're going to have YouTube educator Miss Rachel on the show to talk a little bit more about some of the work she's doing for kids held by ICE. That's coming up tomorrow right here on Stay Tuned Now. And coming up, why the United Arab Emirates is pulling out of OPEC. That is the biggest oil-producing alliance in the world, and what that could mean for gas prices here at home. All right.
Just 1 minute.
1 minute. Oh, shoot. 1 minute. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Oh. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. A couple people in the chat. However, look, the United States doesn't have a straight up law that says we should not put kids in detention centers in immigration. Instead, what they have is this thing that's the Flores settlement. That's the de facto law. It's a settlement. Didn't even go to the Supreme Court. It's settled because the government basically said, hey, we agree to these things. And Congress has not made a law about this. The Supreme Court has not weighed in. So it's this weird, it's a settlement. So that settlement has 10 seconds. We've got to get back to this. Let's continue this conversation because it's very, very important. A lot more complex than you think.
Meanwhile, today marks 2 months since the war in Iran started, and despite a shaky ceasefire, the conflict is far from over. And on top of all the instability from the Strait of Hormuz to the attacks on neighbors all across the Middle East, today another big disruption to all of the geopolitics of oil as the United Arab Emirates announced it is leaving OPEC. That is one of the most powerful organizations on earth that we probably don't talk enough about. OPEC is that coalition of 12 oil-producing giants that essentially coordinate and control oil supply, which helps control prices. And the UAE was its third largest oil producer. That is a big blow to the organization. Plus, it comes as the price of U.S. crude oil is back up past $100 per barrel for the first time since April 10th. Let's bring in Rory Johnson. He is an oil market researcher and the founder of Commodity Context. Rory, thank you so much for being with us. What a crazy day in the oil markets. So UAE is saying that the decision is based on our national interest and our commitment to contributing effectively to meeting the market's pressing needs. Break this down for us, though. Why would the UAE make this move, and what does this do to OPEC?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, as you know, this is a huge deal. And just to stress, you noted that the UAE was OPEC's third largest producer. I would actually say it's arguably its second most important. Even though the UAE produced slightly less than Iraq, the UAE held much larger spare capacity. And spare capacity is really the kind of primary tool that OPEC uses to exert pressure on the market and control prices to a certain degree. So this is a massive deal, and I would argue actually the largest crack in the producer group in its entire history. The UAE is one of the oldest members, clearly one of the most important and politically influential members of the organization, and this marks roughly 59 years since the UAE first joined OPEC, and now it's decided to leave. This joins other large OPEC members that have left over the past couple of years: Angola in 2024, Qatar in 2019, and Indonesia in 2016. It's a shrinking club, and with shrinking production base comes shrinking influence in this market. And the reason why the UAE has decided to leave now, it's actually really had its foot kind of halfway out the door for for the better part of a couple of years now, and has actually been chronically overproducing its official production numbers by about 500,000 barrels a day. It's one of those the worst kept secrets in the oil market is everyone knows that the UAE is cheating, but this I think kind of seals the deal and kind of finalizes a decision that I think they probably started to make a couple of years ago.
Interesting. And I mean, going all the way back to the founding of OPEC, it was in the 60s, and at the time, it kind of acted like a bulwark against the United States, against corporate control of Middle Eastern oil by Western countries. What impact could this have on the cost of oil, and are we going to notice it at home? Because UAE, you've got Venezuela also. That's a big question mark. Like, is oil going to get cheaper here in the U.S.?
Yeah, so let's split this up between the near term and the long term kind of structural elements of this change. In the near term, the issue for any change in the UAE in the near term is that the UAE, the vast majority of its export capacity, is still on the wrong side of the Strait of Hormuz. So they do have some rerouting capacity of the blending port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman side, but that pipeline path is already maxed out. So no matter what the UAE decides to do in this state right now, it can't change production in any meaningful way while the Strait of Hormuz remains closed and the Iran war continues to smolder on. That said, when this ends, given that I was mentioning earlier that the UAE holds the second largest spare production capacity within the OPEC production group, when this ends and when we begin to reopen the strait, you can almost guarantee now that the UAE is going to produce a decent chunk more, probably 500,000 barrels a day or more than they were going into this war, just to kind of unwrap that.
And not to make this zero sum here, but if the spheres of influence in oil are really OPEC, Russia, and the United States over here and Western countries over here, does this now shift things more towards Western country spheres of influence, or are they still going to be siding mostly with their neighbors?
It's a good question. We don't fully know what the kind of go-forward relationship of the Emirates is going to have with the rest of the Gulf. Presumably, they're still going to be relatively tight, and especially if the go-forward state has Iran in some kind of control of the Strait of Hormuz, because they would, similar to Saudi Arabia, be vehemently opposed to that outcome. But I think what we're really seeing here is, I think one of the trends we've seen over the past couple of years is a general devolution of global governance, of global organization. And I think this is a further extension of that pattern that we're seeing, kind of more countries going on their own, kind of saying that these multilateral organizations just aren't worth the kind of price that they were paid. And I think particularly for the Emirates, they received more missile and drone attacks from Iran than the rest of the Gulf combined. And given that they thought that being as part of that was going, part of OPEC, when part of the security umbrella was going to protect them from that, that deal didn't work out for them.
More cracks in the established order. Rory Johnson, thank you so much for your insight. And coming up in the future of everything, a look inside one company that claims it is building the next generation of space stations and is one step closer to liftoff. You don't want to miss this. 90 seconds. All right, we got 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Immigration is so complex, and it is very easy to say this equals this and this equals that. And you're right when you do that, to the point where it runs into whatever we call immigration law in the United States. And that is a hodgepodge of people not wanting to make a decision, people not wanting to, workarounds and all. Immigration law and immigration reform is so badly needed. It has been a bipartisan issue over and over and over again. And because it's never been tackled, we live in this time of just incredible complexity, and a lot of things are very illegal on paper. A lot of things are, laws contradict each other. It's crazy how complex that is. So we're going to continue to delve into these complex issues and give him as much nuance as humanly possible. We'll have a little bit more of that conversation tomorrow. And then a lot of that nuance stops when you talk about kids. So that is a very important
component to all of this, and we're going to continue to look into it. All right, here we go.
And it seems like all of a sudden things are moving very quickly again in the race to put as many humans up into space as we can. And there's this one company right here in Southern California called VAST, and they want to make sure those who break free of Earth's atmosphere have a comfortable place to call home away from home. They are building what could become the next generation space station. So, of course, we had to stop by to find out.
Inside a vast clean room in Long Beach, California, a future orbital space station getting the finishing touches.
Would you like to go inside and see it?
Go
With Colin?
inside?
Yeah,
Let's go inside. Oh, there we go. Wow. This is Haven 1, and while it's a whole lot smaller than the nearly 14,000 cubic foot space station, those who are building it say it's a giant leap in getting more habitable space up into Earth's orbit.
We are a space station builder, and our key goal is to replace the International Space Station and ensure that we have a continuous American presence in orbit.
For the private aerospace company VAST, that means starting with a modular design with the focus on economics and scale rather than expensive specialized systems.
We are doing it in-house, and that allows us to have about 10x the lower cost and about 5x the speed. This was built from raw material.
Like these panels that line the exterior of the space station structure.
To make one structure, we need 35 panels. Each panel has a specific design for handling the loads and the mounting location.
They come to the factory as raw aluminum and are machined here. Max Hote says the completed space station will cost about $150 million. Less if VAST can start building them at scale. And that is a fraction of the more than $100 billion that the International Space Station has cost to date. To put things in perspective, NASA estimates the ISS currently costs $4 billion to operate each year, which would be enough to build 26 of these every 12 months.
It's way too expensive. One of the key goals in transitioning to commercial and retiring the ISS is to have a new model that's much more economically sustainable so that it's much lower cost.
It comes as NASA is retooling for their massive pivot to building a lunar base.
The moon base itself and all the components that go into its assembly will become an extraordinary platform for scientific discovery.
And with the ISS scheduled to be decommissioned in 2030, VAST is hoping to pick up where this storied space station will leave off with a modern twist.
We want this to be a human-centric spacecraft.
Andrew Feustel has been to space 3 times, including spacewalks and a mission to the ISS as commander. He's now lead astronaut at VAST.
These are the sleep quarters. So
these are the beds?
Yeah, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom.
Oh, man.
They're quite roomy by ISS standards. We call this the common area because we imagine that crew will work together, live together, and do experimental work in here as well. This is our payload wall.
And yes, it's definitely given IKEA Apple Store vibes.
We believe that if you create an environment that sort of connects you back, so these are all soft earth tones that are in here. The concept was, if you can feel like you're back on Earth, you may not feel as separated from Earth.
And come early next year.
This isn't Houston. This is Long Beach, California.
Haven 1 is expected to be placed on top of a SpaceX rocket and launched into orbit on a mission to open a new outpost high above our home.
How about that? And still to come, a tradition that spans state lines. People with mullets tossing mullets, as in the fish. That's a real thing, I promise. Stay tuned for that. But first, you got to see this. This is Chunkers, a stellar sea lion who weighs nearly a ton. Boom. There's Chunkers. He's about twice the size of sea lions you would normally see piled up at San Francisco's Pier 39. And after 2 years away, he's back. If you want to see him for yourself, it's best to get there early in the morning when Chunkers does most of his chunking. We'll be right back. He's huge. What a guy. What a good Chunkers. Clear, right?
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
E-block on tape.
All right, guys, if you want to see that mullet throwing, mullet toss, you got to watch on TV. Sorry. We don't know how to do the knock thing yet. Anyway, I love the new design for the ISS. Yeah, it's pretty cool. There, it feels Scandinavian. It feels minimalistic. And you got to remember that what looks small, I mean, it's not huge, but all of a sudden, we think of like square footage. It's crazy. We think of square footage as a two-dimensional plane because it's just our floor, right? This so many square feet. In space, it's cubic feet instead of square feet because you get to inhabit the entire space. You can put your feet anywhere. So it's pretty wild. Hopefully we'll be able to, I don't know, head up there, feel zero gravity, come back down, whenever. Anyway, pretty cool. Author Devin Shannon, I loved trying to imagine what it would feel like to live in a space without all of the things that we take for granted. So gravity, the orientation of up and down, the access to air outside, water, food, all those things. It is crazy that we send humans up to live in space. And this could be one of those futures. SML, we will see you tomorrow. Dennis, thanks so much. I do hope that we keep the old space station. We don't have to use it. I get that it's a huge money suck for now, but past 2030, instead of like deorbiting it, which is basically burning it in our atmosphere, why don't they just put some modules on there, donate a Falcon 9, a Dragon or two, and then just thrust it all the way out into space. And then in the future, maybe people could visit it like a museum. There's a Roadster floating out there. We could probably save the space station. Just put it in like orbit, in the L2 or somewhere out there. We don't have to burn it up, guys. Let's keep that. That is part of our space heritage. Museum, right? We can't put it in a museum. Bringing it down, it's going to get real spicy on the reentry. But we could push it out into space and then make it a museum for future astronauts. Let's see, what else is going on? I think that's about it. Feel free to hang up, guys, because at this point, I got to go check in with Kevin. If you guys want to come, you can come. I'll show you guys around. This is the studio. We go into the control room now. Go bug Kevin. Plymouth Dock. All right, this is the control room. And there's Kevin. Let's go check in.
There's Kevin.
All right, now we got to talk about you guys, so I'm hanging up. See you tomorrow. Bye, everybody. Thanks.